This Wednesday evening, great news, you are not to miss this. Sky News host Peta Credlin will explore the motivations, the myths and the mystery behind Premier Daniel Andrews and investigate just why he has such a hold on the state of Victoria. In a special one-hour documentary, The Cult of Daniel Andrews. I'm pleased to say Peta joins us now. Peta, this looks amazing viewing. We've seen the trailers. Good morning. We've seen the trailers. It's going to be sensational. It's long overdue that someone lifted the lid on what is actually going on with this character and the cult of Dan Andrews. Tell us what you can about, I don't want to spoil everything, but tell us some of the things we can look forward to on Wednesday night.
My motivation, Ron, was, Rita just talked about the stuff in the Herald Sun. There's also been quite a lot of front page news out of The Age as well. So the journalists in Melbourne are really starting to step up and put some pressure on this guy. But my motivation was there was no place where all of it was brought together. And I grew up in Victoria, born and raised, had some time interstate, obviously working in Canberra. And I came back just before the pandemic hit in mid-2019. And I'm gobsmacked at the state of justice and democracy in Victoria. There are all of these issues that happen, whether it's Lawyer X, whether it's now 4 known, potentially 5 anti-corruption investigations into the Premier. There's the concern about this accident involving a young boy critically injured, a whole litany of things, notwithstanding the state budget even. And when you look at them all, there's a noise about them, then they fall away. Another front page, then they fall away. Any one of these incidents would have knocked off another government. We lost a Premier in New South Wales by failing to disclose a bottle of wine, another Premier because she had a dodgy boyfriend. And this guy survives and is in strengthening his majority, certainly at the last election. So what is it behind Daniel Andrews? How effective is the machine? Does he put his mates in positions of authority that are supposed to be the check on the government? Yeah, he does. And when I started to put the trailers to air, the number of good Labor people, good, decent Labor people who reached out to me and said, I've got some more information, you should know about this. Union leaders, Rowan, really strong, once allied to Daniel Andrews, union leaders spoke to me. And I have a whistleblower, a former Labor government minister, who was in an Andrews government ministry, as she has spoken to me.
Wow, amazing. Rita?
That is going to be absolutely fascinating. But this Teflon-like quality that he has, Peta, the way he has weathered these scandals, just scandal after scandal that would have ended any other politician in this country, where does that strength come from? Is he a master politician or is it the weak opposition? Is it the... the media have been tough on him in recent weeks, but he's had a pretty sweet run for most of the Victorian media for most of his reign. Where does his power and his resilience come from?
A combination of all of the above, Rita. He's not magic. I don't like to use the term Teflon because that implies that somehow he can't be beaten. Every leader can be beaten. But I think for too long people haven't respected his rat cunning, his political strategy. And I always say, if you want to beat someone, you've got to respect your opponent. That's a first step towards beating them. But he has a really effective taxpayer-funded machine behind him on social media. He puts journalists in the freezer like Neil Mitchell. The idea that you don't do Neil Mitchell for 5 years and you can still be a credible politician and not face scrutiny is there. There was a saying that the only thing he didn't own and control in Victoria was the Labor Party. But when there was a sting against his factional enemy, Adam Somyurek, that took out the Labor right. It put the left into the ascendancy and they put the party into administration. Excuse me. So he controls. He and Albanese and the federal executive control the Labor Party in Victoria. Business is scared of him. You saw that during the pandemic. Victoria couldn't have been hit harder. And only a few brave souls bothered to speak up about him and his government. So all of this combined, and might I add, mates in positions of authority. So a former staffer is suddenly number 2 or number 3 at Victoria Police. He's got another former staffer running WorkSafe Victoria. He's put a former cabinet colleague in Bob Cameron on as the chair of WorkSafe Victoria. Everywhere you look in Victoria, people have a personal relationship with Andrews and they've been put into positions of authority. There's an investigation going on into the public service, claims that it's politicised. So, I mean, this guy has the most comprehensive stranglehold on the state. The question is, I don't know that the opposition can win, but I do think a government can lose. And I do think in the case of Ian Cook, you could have a situation where a Premier loses. And I implore anyone around the country, and not just Victorians, not just residents in Mulgrave, if you believe in democracy, pick up the phone, ring Ian Cook, donate to his campaign, offer to stand out there and, hand out flyers for him, stand on a polling booth for Ian Cook. I mean, that's the best check we have against this bloke's power, is to take out Daniel Andrews in his own seat of Mulgrave.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to Ian Cook tomorrow night on my program. But one of the confusing things about Dan Andrews is we keep seeing he's going to win in a landslide, he's got no opposition, and yet he doesn't turn up to many public events, football matches and the like. And recently he's been heckled at some press conferences where the public have been close by. And I'm just going to play you a clip from a synagogue. He was giving an address to some Jewish constituents, and have a listen to someone saying, "We will not forget what you did to us last year."
So, we won't forget what you did to us last year. We're not going to say all that. It's taxpayers' money. It's not your money that you're splashing around.
And Peter, the scenes we saw in Victoria with the Jews running across rooftops trying to get away from police because they were trying to observe their religious beliefs. Some of the scenes we saw with the violence inflicted on people, non-lethal rounds shot at people running away from... That happened in Victoria. And do you think people appreciate the full extent of the craziness we were plunged into, or when you're living through it, is it hard to recognise just how crazy it is?
Look, we had rubber bullets on the street in Australia, and I think that would condemn and should condemn any government. Rubber bullets against our own citizens. I mean, that's the stuff they do in crazy countries overseas. We had that in Australia. So in part, I think, Rita, Melburnians in particular, more so than Victorians, Melburnians are traumatised. They don't want to relive any of that. I think it is, though, deeply at the back of their mind when they go to vote. I think it will come to the fore. I don't think they have a good sense of who the opposition is and what will come with a change of government. But I think I'd say to Victorians, it can't be worse than you've got. It cannot be worse than what you have been through. And I think the problem for the Liberal Party is when we were going through that, they were nowhere to be seen.
Exactly.
Both in Canberra, they were nowhere to be seen. And I think that's why Scott Morrison lost the trust of Victorians. We were hung out to dry. But also the Liberals down here, different leader, but the Liberals down here were pretty silent as well.
True, absolutely true. James?
But Peter, I am still, as a New South Wales resident, confused. What is behind that real weird cult-like devotion among so many Victorians you see to Dan Andrews? What does he bring to the party? Because he looks like such an unprepossessing bloke. And you said before that he has all these other things wired up, but one thing he doesn't have wired up is the coalition. Why hasn't the coalition been able to exploit his so many myriad, manifold weaknesses, from even before the pandemic, but certainly since?
I think the trap for the coalition is they've got into this mindset that you can only be positive to win elections. And I know from experience, you've got to go hard on the negative. Now, if you don't do it as the leader, your advertising does, there's someone in your team that does. You have to exploit the weakness of your opposition, and you have to provide hope and put something on the table that people will positively vote for. I mean, when Tony Abbott won in a landslide, he had his foot on the throat of the Rudd and Gillard governments. You heard about that constantly, and you also heard the positive agenda that he was going to put on the table. There's a lot of positives now with the current Liberal opposition in Victoria, but I don't think they're doing enough going after the issue with the Premier. Many issues with the Premier.
It does, Peter, seem a bit like, though, in some ways, those Eastern European countries where we're told, no, the dictator will never be toppled, and suddenly, bang, they're gone the next day. I'm still optimistic, Peter.
We can hope.
We can hope. I'm optimistic, and I think anybody with a shred of optimism has to watch your show on Wednesday night. It's called The Cult of Daniel Andrews, a Peta Credlin investigation. It's this Wednesday, November the 16th, and it's at 7:30 p.m. right here on Sky News, and it'll also be streamed on Flash. Victoria, come on, wake up, watch this show on Wednesday night, and I think you'll be casting your vote very, very differently afterwards.